1. I'm a 20-year-old female, live-in student housing where I share a room. And in the other room are 2 other girls we shall call Sasha and Summer. I share a room with one, B. At first, B wasn't an issue, and we all got along just fine. We were all friends and would go on fun adventures together. But the issues arose when she brought her boyfriend to live with us. At first she said he was visiting for the weekend, but somehow he never left. And she expected us to sneak him into student housing after hours for her, because Sasha and I had cars we could hide him in and drive him past security. This made us extremely uncomfortable, because if we got caught we could get academic probation and whatnot, but the kicker was that she seemed to be aware of all the housing rules and regulations around what she was doing. Later on, she started cat-sitting for her boyfriend as well. Or so that's what we thought. The cat would go to the boyfriend's house from time to time, but for the most part, she kept it at the dorm. But as we could all guess, even more problems started to come out of it. She claimed it was an emotional support animal registered through student housing, so we couldn't get in trouble for bringing her boyfriend's cat over. Since none of us really knew the process for that, we assumed it was fine and minded our business, until one day the RA caught wind of it. But because Summer, Sasha, and I were friends with him, he let it slide because we were all under the impression it would only be there temporarily. Once again, it never left, and she never cleaned up after it, making the apartment reek of cat shit. It destroyed the carpet, one of my uniforms, and when anyone scolded it, she lost it, because she read online that you're not supposed to say no to your cat if you want it to love you, or some dumb BS like that. Anyway, naturally, we were all tired of it, so Summer asked the RA for advice. Where we found out there was no way this cat was documented through housing, meaning she broke the lease, meaning we could get in trouble for the damages it did, let alone being there. He said the cat had to be a minimum of 2 years old, fixed and up to date with vaccines to be able to stay, which it had none of. We confront her kindly, and she turns it into a soap opera scene with screaming and crying, which has been a pattern throughout all of this. She left messes everywhere, and when we asked her to tidy up after herself and respect others' common room items, she took personal offense to it, etc. Our last straw was when she brought an ant infestation into the dorm because she left basically all of her pantry items open. When we called her to let her know we were tossing it all, she got mad and said she'd be over in a few, which to her, I guess, a few means 3 hours, when she was literally 20 minutes away at her parents' house. We had a few friends come over and keep us company while we cleaned, and when she got there, it was immediate crying and yelling about how we only blamed her because she's the youngest. Quite frankly, we were all sick of her and the fact that she was downright unapproachable, so we set up a mediation with our RA, which got changed to the community director due to the bias we had being friends with the RA. Well, that didn't do shit because she went and had her own meeting, where she told a whole sub-story and said that we tried to poison her with Raid, and that the RA gave her permission to have the cat, which he didn't, in attempts to get him in trouble. So, collectively, we all decided on PettyRevenge after she moved back with her parents. We had my mom send a text on Facebook as a concerned parent to both of her strict parents of everything she did wrong, and asked them to consider having a talk with her, so she could see how dangerous it was to have a strange man living with a bunch of girls far from home, and nowhere else to go for safety in the event that he tried to do something. Since doing this, she has not been active on any social media, which she normally eats, sleeps, and breathes on, and she has left any and every group chat we had as roommates, or with any mutual friends. I know what I did was petty and childish, but the 3 of us needed closure after the shit show we lived through this semester, and I hope her parents ripped her a new one for what she pulled. 2. A little detail to understand this story. We have grades go from 1 to 10 in Argentina. You get 3 grades through the year. To pass, their average must be over 6, if not classes failed. Failing 1 class is not a big deal, but it's quite inconvenient. It was my last year in high school. History teacher explains our last assignment. We must do a research investigation in groups to deliver in 2 weeks and get our last grade. Desperately, 2 lazy classmates come running to me and my friend, knowing we're pretty nerdy, and will probably do the assignment even though they don't collaborate. These guys were not bad people, but they were known to let others do their work in these group assignments we had. More than once we ended up doing their part or making last-hour corrections for things that had to be redone. And us two have had enough of this. I said to my friend, we should wait for these guys to plan for our research. See if they have initiative in any way. It was our last assignment for our last year of high school. It was now or never, so we agreed to do this together. Days go by, and nothing. We're not even reminded by them that we have work to do and a due date. My friend tells me she's nervous about the assignment, but then I realized, with our first and second grades, we could fail the assignment and still pass the class. We might lose a nice score in our reports, but we were willing to do that just to teach them a lesson. So we decide we'll do nothing unless they bring it up. The day arrives. Professor walks into the class. The guys come to see if we did the assignment. No report is done. They freak out. With no report, they're failing, it seems, so they talk to the teacher and convince him to give our group one more week. Our teacher was surprised to see me and my friend forgetting about something like this, but then he winked at us. I think he understood what we were trying to do and was okay with it. He knew how the other guys were. To our amazement, nothing from these guys. We thought they might have done something without telling us. They don't even mention the investigation until next class, freaking out again. Professor walks in and never asks for our assignment. We don't say anything about it either. Class goes by, and that's it. This whole thing goes into oblivion. A couple of weeks later, we're on our last day of school. We got our final scores when we were walking out of the building. That's like a tradition. We're all happy, celebrating that we're done with school. Meanwhile, I check my report. I pass all my classes. And then look for history, and I see 10-8-1, lesson 633. We had a 1. My friend passed the class too, so I look for the other guys. They both failed history. They must have thought the professor forgot or something, because they were so shocked. I cherish this after 10+ years. Perfect nerd revenge. 3. Context. I am an 18-year-old female senior in high school. Jacked up the tendon by my thumb on my left hand. I have absolutely no idea how it happened, but it's been screwed up for about 3 days now. I can't write, I'm a lefty. Or pick up my own damn backpack because it hurts too much. I called an urgent care that comes to your house, and they took a look. After they wrapped me up, they told me not to write since I hold pens and pencils in such a way that it's impossible to write without using my thumb, or lift things with my left hand due to the pain. They wrote me a note for that to give to my school. This morning, I gave the note to my school nurse, and they made a copy for them to keep, plus sending out an email to all my teachers about the issue. Now to the real story. I showed up to my first period and showed my note to my algebra teacher, Mr. J. Mr. J didn't even read it and said, "Look, I believe you, but I need you to try your best in doing the work since you need to do it." I can't even write with my right hand since it's practically illegible for anyone to read. I understandably got a little pissed off, but I'm not exactly good at confrontation with teachers, so I left at my desk and tried to write notes with my class. God, it was awful. I felt the pain a little after 5 minutes, and I kept having to stop. I told Mr. J my hand hurts, and he kept just saying, "Do your best." So I went to the bathroom and told my mom what was up, and she told me to go to the nurse and get some pain meds. I did so and told the nurse what was up. Let me tell you, she was pissed. She even sent that email, which I saw was open on his computer at his desk, and when I told her, he still tried to make me write, and that he didn't even look at the note and got even more pissed off. She then got a sticky note and wrote, "No writing. This student will need to have someone else write for her per her doctor's instructions," which is in the note she has shown you. I was sent back and I gave him that note. He was absolutely flabbergasted. He looked at the note, me, the note, and again. I tried so damn hard not to laugh in his face, but I just gave him a smug look as to say, "I told you, you dumb motherfucker." This dude is usually very stoic and doesn't show emotion often, but seeing him panic was the highlight of my day. He then made me take a picture of the notes and didn't make me worry about my homework. I know it's not juicy, but I just call it a small victory on my part. Everything in that class is on paper. Mr. J didn't even set up a Google Classroom, so I was kinda screwed from the start. It's kind of ironic, since his whole classroom thing is treating his students like adults, yet he treats me like a damn child playing Boy Who Cried Wolf. 4. I'm an electronics engineer, currently working in the comm industry. I started my job as an intern at the company of one of my professors. Here in Iran, employers are mandated to pay 80% of so-called insurance, which is a flimsy health insurance and retirement fund. Another one of my professors introduced us, and having seen how passionate he was when teaching, I assumed my employer would be honest and treat me well as I learned the ropes. My whole interview with the project manager of that company, which my professor was the chairman and CEO, lasted around 15 minutes, and they immediately put me on writing a driver for a rather complicated IC. After a lot of self-study, which I didn't expect, I finally finished the project and got a contract for getting hired. However, no insurance for a year and hourly wage, which was less than half the mandated amount. I dismissed my worries by telling myself I was just learning and I enjoy electronics, so no worries. I brought this up once with my project manager, yet he laughed in my face by telling me that I still haven't made any profit, and that we could compensate my low wage by bonuses when they see fit. Unfortunately, I complied. Months pass until I got my first big assignment. It was a heavy project which had me write drivers for memory peripherals, ADCs, etc., and implement a whole signal processing chain all by myself. At first I was excited, but a month into the project I was burnt out. I worked on holidays and overtime, and in the meantime, I was getting fined for small mistakes. I brought this up with the management, and they said they won't give me a raise, and I have to wait for the end of the phase, which meant a milestone in the project. This phase thingy was a holy grail that made employees at that company burn themselves out in hopes of the juicy bonus. By that time, I was seeing the chain of events and how a pattern of abuse was being formed. Excuse me for the language. Burn out the employee with hope, bleed him dry with reductions, throw him a small bonus like a bone for the good doggy. Every time we asked for a raise, they would tell us that they are making investments by buying new equipment and hiring more employees. I decided to resign. At first, I asked to leave on good terms, yet my manager told me that I've signed a contract, so I have to abide by it. I sneered and said, "Okay, cue malicious compliance." Then I pushed hard, like very hard. I did every side hardware project and handled everything related to the project without complaining. They asked me to document my codes and designs, but I excused myself by doing more work. 1 month remaining to the end of my contract, I wrote a resignation letter. The letter legally allowed me to leave my job at the end of the contract, without allowing my employer to make me work to deliver the contract. Of course, seeing how timid I was, they dismissed it as a whim and decided to accept it without bringing it up later. When the deadline of my contract came, it coincided with a demonstration to the client. After this demo, the client was immensely satisfied and told us that they would like to invest a lot in it, making the prototype a full product. Now here came my moment. I packed up the next day and left, just left. By working as a multi-role engineer, I've gained enough experience to land a good job at another company. And all this time I excused myself from documenting any code and designs. This made all my designs unusable for the company, as they couldn't just give it to someone else, so they couldn't continue my work. Meanwhile, they all thought how good and obedient a worker I was and made me an example to everyone. A week or so later, I left. All these days my phone was constantly ringing. I got a call from my manager. He had just wired me a bonus to bring me back to the project, yet I answered, "Well, Professor, your investments can surely do what I always struggled to do," and I hung up. Currently, I'm enjoying a salary 8 times more than the amount he was paying me, with no overtime penalties. Needless to say, the multi-million-dollar project failed and was scrapped. If they only gave me a fair treatment and wage. I kept that bonus the manager had wired. I bought a Heck RF1 with it, plus some other toys. It may not seem much, but the bonus was equivalent to 6 months of my income at that time. Currency value is a bit low around here. I really think I need to share how things work in tech companies around here. If anyone has a YouTube channel or some related channel in other platform, I'd be happy to have a live with you. 5. This was during the 2010 Winter Olympics. I got a job as a parking permit checker. It was a nice gig considering this was during college and that I would get some sweet Olympic gear. Anyways, my job, as you might have guessed, is checking parking permits. The area I was in was the main media center where all the journalists would hang out, and the athletes would come in to do their post-sport interviews. Because the area was considered important, especially since the area also has the Olympic flame, only people with the appropriate parking permits were allowed into the venue and park. Also, as part of the requirements, the permits had to be displayed on the vehicles when parked. Otherwise, we would have to either call the cops, who were always patrolling, or have the car towed. This one faithful day, I was stationed on checkpoint 3, which is where all the cars were parked. Since it was the night shift, I didn't expect any cars to come, so I just walked around and checked to make sure cars had their permits. Though our main job was to check permits, we were also required to report any suspicious activity, regardless. As I was making my rounds, I noticed someone sitting in a van. This was strange, because no one should have been there. I moved in to take a closer look and make eye contact with the person. I tried to be coy and just moved past the van to see what he was looking at. I got pretty close before I saw he was reading anime. In that instant, the guy opens the door and yells at me, "There's a problem." Startled, I said, "No problem, please continue." I radioed the situation into my supervisor, and he said we didn't need to escalate it to the cops since the vehicle had the right permits. I was a bit disappointed since I didn't really like how rude he was to me, but I brushed it off, thought that I probably did something wrong myself. Fast forward to the end of the Olympics, and we're moving from checkpoint to checkpoint as we help the cops clear out the checkpoints. A few vehicles go by. I check their permits as required from a distance, since everyone is displaying the permits on the dash, and just wave them through. Close to the end of my shift, I see a familiar-looking van, and the head of a guy pop out from the driver's seat. It was the anime guy. Now, this vehicle did have the permit required, but there was nothing in the handbook that said I had to let him pass that instant, so I decided to get a little bit of revenge. I stare at him as intensely as I could, and walk slowly to his vehicle. As I get closer, I could see his expression change from smiling to anxious. "Hello there, sir. Excellent evening we're having." I could hear his voice filling with anxiety.
"I hope everything's all right, sir,"
he said with his anxious smile. I get to his vehicle. "I need to see your permit," I say in a firm voice. The people he was carrying all went quiet.
Yes, here you are, sir."
His hands were trembling. I take a moment to look over the permit, flip it over and look at it again. I could feel the tension building inside the van. Obviously the permit checked out, but I wanted to push things a bit further. I looked towards the cops. I knew they were busy and didn't have time to come over, but I decided to say a firm, "Hey," in their direction for appearance's sake. I look back and the guy is turning white. I didn't understand why the guy was turning white, as he had everything in order, but it gave me such a satisfaction to see him shit himself in that moment. I didn't bother calling the cops over, as I told him he could pass, and gave back the permit. As they drove past, I heard a faint,
"Holy shit,"
and the sounds of heavy breathing. I don't know if after that moment, if what I did was right or wrong, but boy, it felt nice. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 215. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Please do poke the like button and share the video around with people named Cyril. If you don't know anyone named Cyril, then anyone else would also be acceptable. Okay, let's see. Let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, in your opinion, do you eat or drink soup? I know that's very controversial of me to say, but hey, that's just the kind of guy I am. What can I say? Personally speaking, I think eating is probably accurate, unless it's more of a thin broth or like a cup of soup with not really any solid bits in it, in which case you're probably drinking it. Yeah, I think that works, but let me know what you think in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.